in Sweden, it is more flat and you kind of can talk to anyone. It's not, if you go and talk to the next manager, you're not going above somebody's head.
It's time to pivot in your confidence, career, and compensation with the 5-Minute Career Hack Podcast every Monday and Thursday. Now, get ready for a special interview curated just for you. Welcome back to the 5-Minute Career Hack Podcast. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button or follow if you're listening on a podcast platform. This really helps more people get access to decades worth of knowledge and expertise that we share and some of our phenomenal guests share every week on the podcast. Today, we have another international powerhouse guest for you. I'm so excited for this interview today. Jessica Hill-Holm is an HR expert with over 15 years of experience for companies like H&M, Nordea, and Sandwich. She founded Hill-Holm Coaching and Consulting to help organizations worldwide achieve their goals by teaching them Swedish leadership skills. If you are a leader looking to take your talents to the next level, you landed in the right spot today. Welcome to the podcast, Jessica. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you so much. Well, I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Awesome. We're so excited to have you here. You are our first guest that we're interviewing from Sweden. So we really appreciate you being on the show today. And I know that you spent some time in the U.S., and I'd love to for the audience to hear more about your journey. I know a little bit more than they do about you, but I'd love for them to hear about your journey and how you landed right here on our show today.
Well, I have spent some time in Los Angeles. I used to live there for almost 5 years. I studied, and then I went back home to Sweden, and I started to work for H&M. Became a manager, HR manager, also worked within Nordea, which is a bank, and then started my own business. And then when I did that, I realized I wanted back to the US because I love the culture. And I think that with my experience and my background, I can also implement a lot of Swedish leadership principles to the US. So kind of both me starting a business and working within this field, I kind of wanted to go back. And that's how I ended up getting connected with you to talk a little bit more. What is it that I mean by Swedish leadership principles and so on?
Yes, I want to take the audience right to that first and foremost, because I think that is such a unique differentiator than any of the guests that we've had on the podcast to date, right? And then we'll get into more about what you do from a coaching standpoint currently in your business. But I would love for you to tell the audience, if you had one thing that you could just say, one statement or one specific portion of what you've learned and how you've been raised with Swedish leadership that differs from the US, what would be that one thing?
Well, I would say collaboration. That is probably the one thing that we kind of don't work in silos. We work more cross-functional, and we kind of have a lot of consensus. I know that can be perceived as not so decisive and so on, but for us here in Sweden, that is something that you kind of learn from early, that you kind of have meetings, you're inclusive, you invite the relevant people to, so consensus, and I would say collaboration.
Now a word from one of our sponsors, JML. Elevate your well-being with our premium multivitamin blend, carefully crafted to nourish your body from within. Our formula combines the power of maca root for natural vitality, magnesium for muscle and nerve function, B-complex for energy metabolism, D3 for strong bones, vitamin E for antioxidant protection, and vitamin C for immune support. Experience the synergy of these essential nutrients in one convenient supplement designed to help you thrive every day. Invest in your health with our comprehensive multivitamin and unlock your full potential.
All right, so let's get to it. Because you've worked in the US, you've worked most of your career in Sweden.
Yes.
What are we doing wrong from the standpoint of collaboration and consensus? Well, obviously, we probably don't gain as much consensus as what you're alluding to, but what are we doing wrong that you think we could do better according to Swedish principles, leadership principles?
Well, Yes, I wouldn't say that you do it wrong, but I think that you could learn from us in a way that, because we're a relatively small country to start with, and we have a lot of, successful companies like Sandvik, H&M, IKEA, and so on. And I think a lot of companies in Sweden are flat organizations, which means that you work more cross-functional and not in silos. And I think that your structure, your leadership structure or your business structure are more built within a hierarchy.
Hierarchy, yes.
Yes, which means that in Sweden it is more flat and you kind of can talk to anyone. It's not, if you go and talk to the next manager, you're not going above somebody's head. So I think that is what makes us different. Of course, you have that in US as well, but I think our that's why we are kind of strong in this point, because the consensus part and the collaboration, but also inclusiveness. I think that is kind of what makes us different from the US. Mhm.
Great points. And I think the thing that stuck out to me in what you said is that because we feel that a lot probably in the US, and I think those that are listening have probably felt this at some point in their career, that they really felt like they had to take a partner or
Mhm.
had to kind of like jump through a couple hoops, or maybe even just apprehensive about going over someone's head, right? Because we're in a
Mhm.
hierarchy kind of situation
Yes,
where it builds up to a CEO in most corporations.
yes.
And I do find that that's an apprehension for most people. So would you say that if, let's just use H&M or IKEA or any company, it would
Mhm.
be, if we're all working in the same building, if I'm a mid-level manager, it wouldn't be anything for me to go into the CEO's office?
No, I can take an example for me. Work when I was working within H&M. I just started out and I had this great idea and so on. And then I had my manager, and then we had the um, country manager for Sweden. Then I talked to him directly about my idea, and he took a meeting with me and so on, and listened to my idea and so on. And there was nothing wrong. Of course, I shared that information with my manager, but she supported me, because that's how you build, both talent and also listening to, people's ideas and so on. So I think that is kind of how we do things.
That's amazing. I did a series on servant leadership some time ago. And if you haven't, audience, if you haven't listened to that series, I think you should, because that's what that feels like, right? Number one, your boss not supporting you, not feeling like they had to personally take the idea to their boss or their boss's boss. They supported you in presenting it. And to your point, that's an incredible development opportunity, right? It also firmly puts the credit in your lap. If you're really passionate about it, it
Mhm.
also firmly aligns your passions and your strengths, and probably makes you more apt to want to stay with that company, if you're, especially if you're
Mhm.
seeing your ideas come to fruition or your strategies come to fruition, and you had the opportunity to speak for yourself. And I would say across most organizations in the US specifically, that doesn't quite exist at a at a high rate at a high rate. So I think that's phenomenal. I think that's
Mhm.
absolutely phenomenal if that's the case. So give me some other differentiators. If you have one other one that you would pick that's very different, that you would want the audience to take away today, that could help them in their leadership, that they might not even be accustomed to doing. Because
Mhm.
that process of being able to take something to your boss's boss, that might take a little work in the US, right?
Yes.
To
Mhm.
create that culture. But what's
Yes.
something that maybe someone could implement today that could help them where they are understanding the US market?
I think also collaboration. I mean, working more cross-functional, because I think that you have finance over here, you have supply chain over here, you have HR over here, and you have your own targets and your KPIs and so on that you work on. But by taking people from different areas and you work together on a problem, that's what we do a lot in Sweden, and what I have seen in the companies that I have been. So you can together reach that goal. I think that so collaboration, starting by doing that, and that doesn't mean it has to be managers. It can be specialists, or it can be people that are really good in their field, so to say, because what you do is you both build talent. You might have diverse discussions or dynamics in the discussion, so to say. So by bringing people in, you can get both innovation and you can get new ideas. So that's what I think is going to lead to this. Then by being open-minded and listening to other people, it will also build trust and accountability, and people want to be, take responsibility when they get to be a part of that. So creating that kind of culture, so to say, I think that is one good thing to start with.
Yeah, so a culture of collaboration and inclusiveness, right? So it's an issue that I don't know how it is in Sweden, and I'd love to hear about it, but we have opportunities with diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
In the US, in corporate America, it's a known fact. There's a pay gap that exists amongst people of color versus Caucasians.
Yes.
There's a gap, obviously, with women as well. So there are opportunities, and from an inclusion standpoint, and collaboration can go a long way to breaking down some of those walls. I know there's a lot of other things that need to happen with legislation and things of that nature, but I know collaboration can help people feel a greater sense of belonging if they're included in the conversation. So I think that's a great point. So I want to shift gears just a tinch, but I do want to keep these Swedish leadership principles that are, to a strong degree, very, very in contrast. They're in contrast with the US and corporate America. But I want to know more about what you're doing in your coaching right now. I know there's a component that is entrepreneurs, and there's a component that is individuals and organizations, right? So let's start with the individuals and organizations. What are some of the common themes that you're currently coaching on that you think you could share some nuggets, some wisdom that you've coached people on recently?
Well, I would say I have coached a lot of new managers, for example, and helping them to set boundaries, for example, and to be grounded in themselves. Because when it comes to coaching, it always starts from within, of course, but to kind of get to know yourself as well, to be self-aware. So those are the things that I usually help my clients with. And then, of course, they come because they want to become a better leader, or but I think that you have to start with the work from within, and your values and what you stand for and so on. So you become that grounded leader with integrity, and that shows your team members respect, and that you listen. So
and you mentioned boundaries. What are some of the things that you see people struggling with from a boundary standpoint that you've coached recently?
To say no, for example, when you're a new manager, what you usually tend to do, you're a high achiever. A lot of times you want to do a good job, and you also don't want to disappoint your team members, so to say. So you want to help them maybe, or you want to help them solve the problems, or you don't want to be wrong. There's a lot of things that can lead up to that. But the problem with saying no, so they take on a lot of workload, and then the balance between private and your professional life is kind of not aligned, so to say. So I think that is an issue.
And that ultimately leads to burnout, which so many people are struggling with in a more heightened way since COVID. 2020, the height of March 2020, more and more people are struggling with burnout. And some of it is because of job security, thinking that they have to do more. And it is sometimes the A-type. Maybe you don't have to do more, but because you're an overachiever, you start a new job or you start a new role, and all of a sudden it's like, I've got to burn the candle at both ends. I've been there. So I fully understand that. I think that's incredible. So what do you suggest? Like, if you were coaching me today, what would you tell me if you know that if I came to you and I was struggling and you're starting with me to do that work from within, what would you tell me, Jamila, that I need to do so that I can get to a point where I can learn to say no?
Yes. Well, first of all, we have to maybe look at the time management and kind of prioritize to see. And and look at the resources. Can you delegate? Can you involve other people in your team? There's a lot of things that you can do. But of course, we need to look at the workload and kind of to see, is there anyone that we can involve? So that's why it's so good with this collaboration and kind of know your team members, because then you can probably delegate a lot of things. And then also, I think it's important as well, when you're a manager, you need to lead by example. If you have children, or if you have, dog or whatever, you work from 8 to 5. You don't send emails afterwards. You follow the policies that we have on, availability or emails or communication policy, whatever. So I think that also, to say that it's okay. I go home at 5 o'clock today, maybe not every day, but to go home and be with my family. So I think there's a lot of things that you kind of have to look at, so to say, before I can really say that this is what you need to do. But
those
so
are some
it can
of the
be
things
different.
that you would look at.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which are awesome. So obviously time management, prioritization, but also understanding if you're also in a leadership role being led by someone, but you have direct reports, that you lead by example when it comes to learning how to shut it off and having a boundary that still leaves a personal life available to you. Because more often than not, I'd say 99% of us, we do this, whatever this work is, for our families, for ourselves and for our families. So not getting to enjoy that time or getting to enjoy the fruits of your labor, again, also leads to burnout. And ultimately, I've seen people lose their passion for what they're so great at, that they were once so passionate about, because of the inability to set boundaries. So I think that's such a great point. Such a great point. So tell me, what do you have going on in your business right now that I know, you're transitioning back to the US, but what do you have going on in your business from an organization standpoint? Like, what are you doing for organizations? What's the type of work that you're doing there?
Well, right now, both I have like leadership coaching, and then also I'm within an HR assignment. So I'm actually in Sweden, but for an American company. So I'm working with a lot of leaders at the moment, a lot of HR issues, talent management, a lot of those things I'm doing at the moment. And
Excellent.
also, employee surveys and follow up on that and so on.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. So if you could leave the audience with one major thing, and I'm not the final 5 words yet. I always like to ask at the end of the podcast, I like to ask everyone what final 5 words they'd like to leave with the audience. But this question specifically, if you had your utopia in the world today from a leadership, management, career standpoint, what would be your mark that you would leave and be able to share with the audience right now? What would that be? Perfect world for you.
I think that we would have authentic leaders that would really understand the importance of people. Because, if you take care of your people, like Richard Branson said, if you take care of the people, they take care of the business. So if you understand that connection, and you will gain so much when it comes to profitability, engagement, and so on. So that I would like to kind of
that would be perfect world. If I'm 100% aligned with you, that when you're invested is the word I like to use.
Yes.
Because it's a form of an investment, in my opinion, those deposits that you make into other individuals. When you're investing in people, right, as long as they're living and breathing, there's always a return. Whether that return comes back to you directly, goes to the bottom line, goes to other employees, goes to your customers, there's always a return. There's always an ROI when you invest, when you make a deposit in a person, whether that's from a development standpoint, promotions, compensation, benefits, whatever that might be, there's always a return. I believe us as human beings do not have the ability not to provide a return on what's been sowed into our lives. So we're 100% aligned with that. I think that would be a perfect world situation, but not just in corporate America. I think that would be perfect world situation across the board in our lives, personally and professionally, if we were able to do that and do that a little bit more freely on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's an incredible point. Thank you for sharing that. That's your perfect world. It would be my perfect world as well. So as we wrap up, as I always like to do, share your final 5 words with the audience, Jessica.
Oh, that's a hard one. Well, I think that, to use the Swedish leadership principles to be more inclusive and to try it out, use collaboration as a first step, I would say.
Try inclusion and collaboration would be your way to go. And that's how you would advise leaders. And thank you for sharing something very different with our audience today. I would suggest to everyone, man, be sure you're connected with Jessica on LinkedIn, and we'll leave that a way to connect with her in the show notes and in the description of this episode. I believe that we could all learn a ton from the companies that operate in this way. And she mentioned a few of them. So reading a case study or two about their effectiveness from a Swedish leadership principle standpoint, I think would be absolutely worth our time. So I suggest that everyone do that. Take that away as homework. You may not be able to incorporate everything that Jessica discussed today in your current leadership, in your current organization, but we can all take small steps, especially around collaboration and inclusion as Jessica mentioned. So I appreciate you, Jessica, for being on the podcast today. I know our audience received so much value from what you shared today, and I truly enjoyed having the conversation with you. It keeps what I enjoy about what I do top of mind, working with people and the youth. So I really appreciate you being on with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and take care.
Awesome. And as I always end every podcast, I love you guys, and I'll see you next time. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed doing it for you. However, it doesn't have to end there. Come on over to our Facebook group community right now for free. You're going to get exclusive content that we weren't able to include in this episode as well as past episodes. We've got challenges, we've got research, we've got lives, you name it, all for you in bite-sized chunks so that you can continue this development journey. Go ahead, click the link right now in the description show notes, and we'll see you there.